you told someone. Maybe it was a friend, maybe a parent, maybe someone you trusted with the version of yourself that hadn't arrived yet. You told them about the plan, the book, the business, the training, the decision to finally change direction. And they looked at you and they said, "That's incredible. You're going to do something amazing." And for a moment, maybe 20 seconds, maybe a full minute, it felt real. It felt done. It felt like the work was already behind you and the reward was already in your hands. And then you sat down to actually do it, and nothing came. The drive was gone. The urgency had evaporated. You opened the document and stared at it and felt nothing where the fire used to be. You told yourself you were tired. You told yourself you'd start properly tomorrow. And the plan, the one that had felt so alive in that conversation, quietly began to decompose. You didn't fail because you're undisciplined. You didn't fail because you don't want it badly enough. You failed because your brain settled the bill before the work was done. You collected the reward before you earned it, and the nervous system, ancient, efficient, indifferent to your ambitions, simply closed the account. Today we look at why silence is not secrecy, why silence is not fear, why silence, for a man who understands his own neurology, is the sharpest weapon he owns. Let's go into the machine. Deep in the center of your brain sits a structure called the Nucleus Accumbens. It is the engine of motivation. It is the part of you that generates the chemical drive to pursue, to build, to execute. It does not distinguish between a real achievement and the social simulation of one. It cannot tell the difference between finishing the book and being told the book is going to be brilliant. Both release dopamine. Both feel like reward. Both satisfy the system. This is not a metaphor. This is the actual mechanism. When you share an unfinished plan with someone who validates it, someone who says, yes, you're the right person for this, this is going to work. Your nucleus accumbens fires. The same neurochemical signal that should arrive at completion arrives early, at announcement, and the brain, having received its payment, does what any rational system does. After being paid, it stops working. The satisfaction you were supposed to feel at the finish line gets spent at the starting gate. Now consider the opposite case. You share your plan with someone who doubts you, someone who says, "I don't think you can pull that off." And something shifts. A different signal fires. The survival instinct, the ancient mammalian drive to prove, to compete, to override the verdict of a skeptic. The brain suddenly has a reason to move, not toward reward, but away from the threat of being wrong about yourself. But here is the catch that nobody tells you. That mechanism only works if your internal reward history is intact. If your brain has enough past evidence that you finish what you start, enough accumulated proof that you are the kind of person who delivers, then the challenge of a skeptic becomes fuel. But if that history is thin, if the brain has no stored record of completed efforts and earned rewards, then the skeptic's voice doesn't ignite you. It confirms your deepest fear, and you stop before you begin. This is the thin line. Validation kills the drive softly. Doubt either sharpens you or destroys you, depending on the architecture of your self-belief. And the only truly safe position, the one that requires no external conditions at all, is silence. 2,500 years ago, in a text so compressed it barely fits into 100 pages, a man named Lao Tzu wrote something that most people read as poetry, and almost nobody reads as neuroscience. Those who know do not speak. Those who speak do not know. This is not a riddle. This is a precise description of energetic economy. Lao Tzu was writing inside a tradition, Taoism, that understood something modern psychology has only recently begun to map, that speech is not neutral. Every time you articulate an unfinished intention to another person, you are doing two things simultaneously. You are releasing internal pressure, and you are inviting external interference. Both of these weaken the signal. The Taoist concept of Wu Wei, often translated as non-action or effortless action, is fundamentally about conserving the force that makes things happen. It is the philosophy of the river, not the waterfall. The river does not announce its direction. It does not ask permission from the landscape. It moves through the path of least resistance with absolute, silent commitment, and it arrives. The waterfall is dramatic. It makes noise. Everyone watches. And it goes nowhere. Lao Tzu was not telling you to be secretive out of paranoia. He was telling you that the energy that lives inside an unspoken intention has a structural integrity that speech destroys. The plan that exists only inside you is complete, contained, pressurized, the moment it enters language. Especially language directed at another person's judgment, it becomes subject to their gravity, their doubt, their enthusiasm, their projection of their own limitations onto your future. All of it lands on the plan and begins to reshape it. You think you are seeking feedback. What you are actually doing is seeking permission. And permission, by definition, belongs to the person giving it, not to you. Here is the uncomfortable question. Why do you tell people, not the surface answer? The actual answer, beneath I wanted advice, and I was excited, and I thought they could help. What were you actually looking for in that conversation? In most cases, the answer is this. You wanted the feeling of having already arrived. You wanted for 60 seconds to inhabit the version of yourself who had done the thing. And the other person's reaction, their excitement, their belief in you, was the fastest available simulation of that feeling. You were borrowing your own future, and the interest rate on that loan is your actual motivation. This is the mask. The illusion that talking about the work is a form of doing the work, that announcing a transformation is the same as undergoing it. Social media has made this instinct into an industry. 1 million people have built entire identities out of narrating their journey. The gym selfie before the habit is formed, the starting my business post before the first customer exists, the public accountability thread that delivers the dopamine of completion without a single line of real output. The mask is comfortable because it provides all of the social reward of achievement with none of the difficulty. And the longer you wear it, the harder it becomes to remember what the real thing felt like. Take it off. Let the work happen in the dark. Strategic silence. Not the silence of shame. Not the silence of someone who has given up and doesn't want to explain why. The silence of a man who understands that the energy of an unspoken intention is a resource, and he is not going to spend it on a conversation. Here is the practice. Before you speak about anything you intend to build, pause. Ask yourself one question. Why am I sharing this? Not rhetorically. Actually answer it. Am I looking for genuine expertise this person has? Am I sharing because the collaboration requires it? Or am I looking for validation? Am I looking for the feeling of being seen, being believed in, being approved of? If the honest answer is the last one, close the door. Not because the world is hostile, because you don't need them to believe in it. You need to believe in it. And the deepest form of self-belief is the willingness to work on something that nobody else knows about yet. Let the results be the announcement. This is what Lao Tzu understood. Over 2,000 years ago, Sun Tzu wrote the ultimate manual on human conflict, and his core doctrine applies to the battlefield of your own mind, that your plans be dark and impenetrable as night, and when you move, fall like a thunderbolt. Strategic silence is not absence. It is the violent accumulation of kinetic energy. Every day that you work without an audience, you are stockpiling ammunition in the dark. No one can drain it with their doubt. No one can disarm it with premature praise. And when the work is done, when it stands on its own, visible and complete and undeniable, you will feel a satisfaction so different from the borrowed feeling of early announcement that you will never want that cheap substitute again. Go to the comments. Don't tell me your plan. Tell me the last time you announced something before it was done and what happened after. One sentence. I read every single one and I respond. Because this channel was not a broadcast, it's a conversation between people who were done performing their lives for an audience that was never paying attention anyway. Today, you saw the mechanism. You saw how the brain spends the reward before the work is complete. You saw how the river moves, quietly, without permission, without announcement, and still arrives. You saw that the most powerful thing you can protect is not your idea. It's the unspent energy of a plan that nobody has touched yet. Silence is not weakness. It is the pressure that makes the work possible. But here is what waits on the other side of this. Once you stop performing for others, once you pull the plan back inside and close the door, you will have to face the silence alone, and in that silence, you will hear something you have been drowning out for a long time. The question of whether the plan was ever truly yours to begin with, or whether it was built quietly and without your knowledge from the expectations of everyone who shaped you before you were old enough to choose. Whose dream are you executing in the dark? That's the next room.